minute past, so we're going to get started. Thank you everyone for joining Morphisec's webinar, which is our CTO briefing, the state of ransomware. Here we have Michael Gorlick, our CTO, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer. My name is Brad Laporte, and I will be your moderator for the webinar. If you have any questions at all throughout the session, please just go into the Q&A box and type in the question, and we'll be sure to answer it at the end of the briefing. So today, this is going to be a high impact briefing where we'll share basically the latest insights into ransomware trends, emerging attacker techniques, and actionable strategies to defend against these evolving threats. This is specifically tailored towards CISO, security leaders, and IT professionals dedicating to staying ahead of ransomware risks. So today, we're going to do a deep dive into the most active ransomware groups. We're going to talk about the evolving tactics, what's really happening, how they're specifically targeting specific verticals. We're going to talk about the evolution of this space, specifically ransomware as a service. And we'll talk about the truth of ransomware, anti-ransomware, and protection against ransomware failures, and proven strategies for this year and beyond, and what 2026 has to hold. So we'll talk about recommendations, and then we'll go into Q&A. So without further ado, Michael Gorlick, thank you so much for having us. If you could just do a very brief introduction, and we'll go forward with the presentation.
Thank you, Brad. As always, it's a pleasure. Michael Gorlick, Chief Technology Officer. Founded Morphisec 11 years ago, 20 plus years of cybersecurity experience, red teaming, blue teaming, reverse engineering, supply chain, crime groups, everything from A to Z. And today we'll focus around ransomware. As Brad already done a very good introduction, I will dive directly into today's material. Okay, so we are trying to do this kind of updates quarterly. So now it's a Q4 update. We are looking back into Q1, Q2, Q3, and even a bit from this quarter. Some of the information we are sharing here are well known. Some information will be less known. Nevertheless, I think it's very much beneficial information for most of the CISOs, directors of threat, and directors of SOC, and many other security-oriented personnel that wants to protect against ransomware. So again, right now we are seeing a surge, as always. We have during every year and year over year, we see an increase in ransomware payments and the total amounts, average, medians, in parallel to a drop in the amount of payments, which is kind of like against intuitive in a way. There are less victims that are paying ransomware. There's a small decrease, I would say. I think even yesterday or the day before that, Bleeping Computer also published a drop into 23%. Some will say 26%, 25% of the victims that are being attacked by ransomware successfully will eventually pay. So the amount of victims will definitely are less, but the size of the ransomware payment significantly increases. It's a business model. The attackers, hackers, crime groups looking to sustain the business. Therefore, it is just expected that the average payment for a single successful ransomware will increase. Obviously, for organizations, it's not the main or the most significant fact of impact. The lack of business continuity will be much more significant with that regard. But still, it impacts the business continuity, and in some cases, paying the ransomware group reduces the containment strategy. Now, when we are looking at the source, why do victims pay or why they don't? There are different research articles. Some suggest that most of the victims pay essentially impacted by backups. It's known that backups not always work. It's actually rare that they work. They might work for some part of the organizations. They might work for the organization itself, but stored in the same VLAN. They might work daily, but then the transaction critical information is not being saved. So again, configuring, installing backups is important, but it's extremely challenging to do it the right way. Validate that as well. It's also something most victims and customers and companies are not really doing it the right way. Aside of obviously having a disruption continuity program or plan. So again, backups not working or backups encrypted or backups not abused is a significant reason for payment. The other one is obviously the PII, especially in cases of private financials, healthcares, legal, where the PII can lead to 5 years of scrutiny with liability and legal implications. When we're looking into 2025 versus 2024, a slight shift in the ransomware group leaderboard. In 2024, there was the Ransom Hub that played a significant role. It's still there, but Keelan and Akira took the leadership. Akira kind of went back, and Keelan is probably the most significant right now. We had the unfortunate opportunity to deal with them a number of times on many of our customer sites, and so is Akira. Has very interesting modes of operandi, which we will talk about them as well. Clop, as always, are really into exploiting new 1 day or 0 days file share exploit vulnerabilities or network monitoring, like they go anywhere, etc. So as soon as there is a new vulnerability in that domain, they are expert in this domain. They will get their significant amount of successful ransomware operations, but then they will wait for the next one, which is very different from Killing Akira that are very much active all the time. So before we kind of dive into the different 3 types of ransomwares that I want to share today, ransomware as a service, direct ransomware, and ransomware without encryption, I do want to share some indicators that we already see from Q4. So it's really recent. Some of those things we actually experienced in the past couple of weeks on different customer environments. So I think it's important, especially for other companies, to be prepared for this kind of operations. Specifically, we saw Akira. Akira is number 2, as I just mentioned, abusing the Sonic Wall vulnerabilities, specifically the non-patched ones, whoever has the cloud backup enabled. It's called My Sonic Wall. Basically, they are exfiltrating the configurations which allow them, it's called, I think, EXP file, if I'm not mistaken, and then they can leverage that information to re-enter through the same service directly into customer environment. Keelan is still exploiting some FortiGates, even though it's a bit older, so non-patched ones are definitely relevant. So those are kind of the initial entries aside of the social engineering that we saw really in the past couple of weeks. Social engineering, I mean, we see that through the 2025 almost every month, but even in the past couple of weeks, social engineering through Teams, it becomes so popular. We see customers being called, many employees in the same time, like 3, 4, 5, 6 employees are being contacted by the attackers through Teams, sometimes because of misconfigurations, and which allows external team calls and other ways of contacting. But essentially, those employees are being contacted by Teams through Teams and being convinced to install like Quick Assist, which is given and built in within the operating system, which allows the remote control for the attacker and a further installation of the next steps that are interesting as well. But again, this is kind of the more popular social engineering recently. Obviously, there are other methods, very interesting and cool one from the perspective of the threat analyst, which relates to sophisticated phishing. But I had to stop here for a second because this is really, and this really evades at least one or two employees are really usually agree to this kind of IT help desk impersonation and do allow the remote attacker to connect to the endpoint. In some of the events that we analyzed that could eventually end up with ransomware by the same groups, interesting to observe different variation of persistency backdoors. I think I'm notified that on LinkedIn kind of very shortly, but there were definitely interesting investigations. I mean, attackers usually install more than one backdoor, even more than two backdoors, just to maintain persistency. Because again, as always, you have a internal, external incident response team working, trying to contain the event. Even without incident response, they're trying to close the door, maybe try to block, contain the firewalls. So what the attackers are doing, they're leaving kind of a backdoors to re-enter the environment, even if one of those backdoors will be compromised. Screen Connect was used in a very interesting way in the past couple of weeks by attackers in a very sophisticated persistency method through authentication packages, LSA. If anyone wants to connect with me directly, I will share that technique with them. But again, we saw the attackers connecting directly from Screen Connect, deploying shellcodes, executing commands, and eventually leading to a compromise of the environment. We saw attackers deploying portable Node.js packages, in some cases even vulnerable packages, to re-enter into the environment while this Node.js is established outside. The same with Java portable packages. Even without having Java, they basically put you a full folder with all the dependencies in place. Java operates as a service, and you have a backdoor reentry. Interesting evasions that we experienced in the past couple of weeks, month, especially when the attackers failed to evade MorphoSec after evading EDR. They tried to deploy, this is kind of the end goal, to try to evade security control, evade security control. So deployment of non-protected machines, such as VirtualBox. In this case, it was a VirtualBox of Windows 7, old Windows 7 machine. But there are other cases of deployment of non-protected virtual environments, or doing that from a non-protected appliance or device or a gateway. A very high percentage of encryption operations today are going on from non-protected appliances, gateways, file shares, QNAPs, backup servers, and others that essentially you cannot install like an agent on top of them. And this is why it's very important to protect against the remote encryption of those devices. It works. It will continue to work, and attackers will continue to abuse it. So this was kind of a very quick summary of what we saw in the past couple of weeks. Now let's talk a bit about the three type of ransomware that we experience in the in the past couple of months. I'm going to talk about ransomware as a service, uh, one team ransomware, and ransomware without encryption. So ransomware as a service is probably the leading type of ransomware that most of the victims experience today. Here I brought up a very much advanced group, as I think it was also evaluated by Mitra at some point. Native English-speaking dudes basically reappeared after a small disappearance, targeting financials, telecoms. I mean, you can have a lot of information about Scalar Spider. There were some arrests in this area as well. This is not the goal or objective of this webinar. The objective is talking about ransom service. And in this case, this group used, at least in the case of Mark and Spencer compromise, which was a very much significant impacted the organization for almost 3 months of recovery, 750 million brand reputation damage. And I mean, we can count the additional impact and the cost associated with this ransomware. But eventually the ransomware encryption group itself that is often interested at the moment is Dragon Force, a ransomware, known ransomware as a service. Kylin, by the way, is also ransomware as a service. And in this case, you basically can rent these services, utilize Dragon Force. You need to pay out for the ones that give you the capability of using that. And this works like that. It's actually very interesting. We can also spend a lot of time on that, but quickly, ransomware as a service, I think it's one of the most developing areas within the crime groups that is associated with ransomwares. Groups compete with each other over who provides more services for their customers. Customers are those crime groups that eventually successfully encrypt the victim. There are some leaders like Kylin that provide services like law office services. They actually can go over your data, find out who are your supply chain, call those supply chains to double down on pressure with regard to exfiltration. They will provide you services that really will push the victim to the end and basically convincing him to pay the ransom. They, for example, get around 10 to 20% of the ransom payment, and the 80% goes to you. Most of the ransomware as a service are taking between 15 to 30% of the ransom payments. Some, like Pay to Key, for example, are taking a percentage based on how much do you support the hostile activities against Israel. So if you support it, then they will take only 20%, otherwise they will take 30%. There are some requirements to join and use these services. Pay2Key is probably the only one that doesn't ask for pre-money. All others require between, let's say, $1,000 to a bit more to just participate. And they will kick you out for no activity within a very short time. So really, the crime groups or the individuals that are looking to attack and make good money, not good, but quick money, sorry, will be pressured to do that quickly. But you know, it's enough about ransomware as a service. This would probably be one of the attacks that one of you experience or will experience, unfortunately. Let's jump over that. The other one is when a group can do everything from initial access brokers, buying the credentials, laterally move within the network, doing the encryptions and the exfiltration. Those kind of activities are usually, as in the case of ransomware as a service, are kind of split between different groups, and there is collaboration, and each one gets a chunk. Here we're talking about groups that basically do all the work, but also get most of the money back. And SafePay is a good example, and the Ingram Micro, which was one of the more known in 2025 compromises, experienced that. But so as other cases, maybe a bit less known in 2025. In this case, we're talking about targets which are IT, MSSP, professional service, MSP, manufacturing. With one compromise, you can get to many other compromises through distribution, through management of customers, etc. And then there's an interesting increase in ransomware encryption, ransomware exfiltration without encryption. The advantage here is you do the exfiltration, you send an email 6 months after. The customer, almost no chance that the customer will know how the attacker went in, will probably not identify its own vulnerabilities, will be very difficult to do any forensic investigation, but the data is obviously exfiltrated. In some cases, we found that some CEOs get those physical mails directly, not even emails, from the attackers, sharing about the exfiltration and the way to pay. But in other cases, we found impersonators. It's like there wasn't even exfiltration happening, so be extra vigilant and careful, because not necessarily you had any exfiltration, and we do see Bitcoins transferred or other money, virtual money transferred, even if there was no real exfiltration. So you need to be vigilant. Really have that information. You want to have proofs for real exfiltration in your firm. I mentioned here very quickly the different types of escalations, exfiltration. I think it's also important. I didn't mention it at the start. I think during 2025, especially in the last couple of months, we really experienced exfiltration through Azure copy. I think it's one of the more relevant techniques today. Previously, it was a lot about Omega, using things like rclone. But recently, in almost most, I would say, in many of the recent events, it was around exfiltrating into Azure, into some kind of random bit bucket. Very hard to stop because you have a lot of processes communicating with Azure, and a lot of the backup going to the same kind of URLs. And obviously, adversaries are leveraging the same concept. And you have Azure copy running from one of your servers, sending the there. Next, just a bit about the different techniques. Some of that is obvious. I think some of that was published in other articles as well, but exfiltration, there's no ransomware without exfiltration, but there are ransomware without encryption, right? So exfiltration is kind of the main technique that you would experience almost every ransomware event, if not all the ransomware events. Lateral movement, also very popular technique. You want to get to the crown jewels. You want SQL servers, to your file share servers, and to your DC eventually, to get and exfiltrate different user information. Impact is the encryption component or distraction component, depending on the geopolitical or geolocation that you are. It could be that the end objective is just destroying your data. But if you're talking about a real ransomware with the objective of getting money from you, then it would be encryption. And defense evasion. Defense evasion is important. There are many tactics, if you look at MITRE, to a successful attack chain, starting from persistency, initial access, execution, C2 communication, etc. Not all of them really popular when we are talking about ransomware, not necessarily, especially not the C2 communication, but the defense evasion has to be there because you need to evade the current security stack. There are many evasions. We'll talk about them, the ones that we see during 2025. But almost every ransomware event, you'll see evasions. Without evasions, the ransomware wouldn't work. It's a common fact that the adoption of EDRs and basic security stack is kind of very close to perfection in North America. And there is nothing 100%, but if we're talking about middle size and enterprises, most of them adopted one of the leading EDR solutions. And nevertheless, the amount of ransomwares didn't go down. Discovery and reconnaissance is also very popular, especially running things like advanced IP scanner, ZenMap, Nmap, port scanners, etc. There are many tools that are being executed, and many of them are being used by your IT. Just a couple of points about the defense evasion very quickly. While there are a lot of discussions about bring your own vulnerable driver, and I think Microsoft is doing great to support and extend the list of certificates drivers that are misused today. You can enable that feature and basically reduce your attack surface. But there are a lot of evasions by encryption through safe mode. We see that a lot. Many of the EDRs, especially after the significant impact of CrowdStrike blue screens, are not really operational, or at least not fully operational in safe mode, which is a great ground for adversaries to do the encryption successfully without being prevented. So safe mode is definitely a big in the evasion. Impersonating AV replacement. There are different leading techniques right now to try and tamper with existing security controls. There's a recent one, really couple of weeks ago, by basically allowing to write into the directories of the EDRs. Others are basically compromising the notification callbacks. There are ways to tamper with the telemetry data that is being collected by the EDRs, like through AMSI or ATW. And if, again, there's no telemetry, there's no detection, there's no prevention or isolation. So there are ways to tamper with EDR without stopping the EDR. Obviously, if you try to stop and crash the EDR, then you'll probably have red alerts anywhere. So attackers are not doing that. Native tools utilizing, trying to evade by doing encryption without encrypting the file systems, whether it's going through wiping functionality, hypervisor, E6i, micro. So this way, basically, not trapping on the booby traps of the EDR. Custom encryption methods. There are solutions that try to intercept different, let's say, keys, etc. So ransomware adopting Golang, Rust, more high-level languages, while trying to bypass those hooking mechanisms and behavior detection. This is why they are very much successful. Everything is static, nothing to hook, nothing to monitor. So the behavior and TTPs are not there to prevent. So you are left to response. So this is also known to be utilized and be used by ransomwares. Firewall tampering. Again, tampering from your agent to report to the console. If you don't have visibility, you don't have prevention, isolation, etc. And many more techniques. We don't have too much time to go over them, but those are just part of the techniques that we see and we saw on the. Now a bit of marketing pause, but I think it's not only marketing. I think it's a security methodology or a security Bible, at least to what I believe that needs to be implemented on the endpoints, and not only on the endpoints. Endpoints is also workload servers and EC2 machines, anywhere that you have a security stack of security agents installed. Endpoint security, EDRs are very much important, perimeters, even DLPs. Anti-ransomware has to be considered as a same layer as any other of those layers. You need to deal with recovery of files. You need to deal with encryption, exfiltration. While each of those layers are focusing on the problem, perimeter is on the reputations and IP and phishing, etc. Ransomware is a problem, is a huge problem, and you have to put all your focus on that. And therefore, I really believe that any company needs to consider that as a layered approach and deal with anti-ransomware essentially in addition to all the other layers. That's it from my side. So we are open to questions at this moment.
I'm completely blown away every time I hear you speak, Michael. So thank you very much for these amazing insights. Really is a pleasure to have you here today. So while you've been talking, there's several questions that have come into the queue. So I appreciate folks. Please, if you have any others, please add it into the Q&A. So the first one in the chute that I have here is, how do attackers target specific organizations versus launching like opportunistic attacks? So like who is really at risk from ransomware attacks? The most at risk, I think, is what they're asking.
So everyone who has money, right, at risk, who can pay. But the question, I mean, it's a quick answer, but really, attackers are doing more reconnaissance in some way, especially when attacking enterprise. There's a targeted approach, as I mentioned, through team calls, through specific very organized phishing opportunities. We see that in specific phishing emails. In some cases, AI is being involved to really generate a well-believable phishing scenario. But mostly it's also opportunistic. Again, if you find in the dark web that in one of the breaches some credentials have been exposed from this or that company, it will not take a lot for the attackers to get those credentials, try to abuse them and re-enter. We actually see in some of the breaches that we needed to investigate, there were more than one actors in a given time in the infrastructure of a customer. So they are very much opportunistic with that case. If there are credentials and there are exposed vulnerabilities over Snowden, however you call it, definitely expect to be rich. So you need to close your gaps. I mean, Sonic Wall, the cloud backup. I mean, if it's on and you have that management console, you will be breached, right? So this kind of things are obvious, but if you are more or less maintaining the right, let's call it the right posture, then there will be a bit more reconnaissance and targeted phishing for your environment.
Yeah, and so that's a good dovetail into the next question. So are EDR, so endpoint detection response, and backups and backup recovery tools sufficient enough for ransomware protection? Given this presentation, this question came in earlier in the session, so I think it's good to just highlight this. But like basically, why is there a need for a dedicated anti-ransomware solution like Morphisec?
Yeah, I mean, it's mentioned kind of very quickly. I'll be quick about that as well. Again, EDR is a very important tool to have. Anyone that I will do incident response, I will tell them, go and get EDR. EDR is there to cope with a huge attack surface. And attack surface is not only ransomware, right? We're talking about insiders. We are talking about like any credential theft or any like internal IPs. There are reputation-based threats, poor miners, many other threats. So they need to do a lot and defocus. And when we're talking about ransomware, the ransomware problem is so large that you need to focus. You need to provide a full holistic solution to that. So some things may overlap with EDRs, as exactly like EDRs may overlap with DLPs or something of that sort, or those data security protection. Or identity can overlap with others, but you need to put all your focus, right, when we are talking about ransomware as a problem, and provide the relevant solutions. Now, backup are good post-attack, right? If you are successfully encrypted, you will need to recover. Assuming your backup really work, which is very rare, you still need to invest a lot. You will already spend a lot of money and time. The business continuity will be disrupted. You'll need to recover. So to avoid the recovery, spending the time, you still need to have backups, but you want to prevent that. So prevention first approach is crucial. Even with EDRs, it's a responsive first approach in many cases. So you usually you are already compromised, and then the isolation and the response gets into action. In many of the cases, this is the case. So prevention first is important, especially in the ransomware case, and especially if you can apply innovative approach to that, such as deception, is critical.
Got it. Perfect answer. We have time for about two more questions. So the next one is, what's the best way to defend against lateral movement and just really advanced ransomware techniques? So I know we talked about LSAS dumping and credential theft and things like that. So I don't know if there's you had some opinions on that.
I mean, it's kind of touches upon the different discussions. I would maybe even add on top more. So lateral movement is just a stage in a chain of a ransomware attack. So lateral movement is important. First, you want to identify what is your attack surface. How many of the servers, critical servers, is your identity reaching to, right? You need to understand, and this is some of the things that we provide as well, you need to understand what is your attack surface exposure for ransomware, right? What kind of misconfigurations, ransomware misconfiguration can happen. For example, have administrative shares open, and you MI or WRM open on critical servers. Lateral movement will expose those, will leverage those, and will allow the attacker to get to your crown jewels, right? So understanding that risk is important, something we also provide. Now, assuming you have that risk, you cannot patch it, you have a legacy system. Now, putting that deception solution that cannot work with the network all the time, such as what we are putting to minimize the lateral movement through exploitation, is also important. So we can talk a lot about lateral movement, but really you need to consider the aspects of visibility, prevention, and then response with regard to ransomware, right? With regard to and again, you can check out Morphosec for that purpose. We really provide the visibility, prevention, impact prevention, and then recovery, response, and recovery, all those pillars. I think we can
Understood. Yeah,
also
great.
touch the fourth question, right? Very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. So the last question that we'll go into is how, basically what's the future of ransomware? And how AI and AI driven threats will basically evolve over time.
I think it's
And what's the
probably
best?
the most important question.
Yeah,
I would say
it is. It
because
really is. This is the new frontier. And
yes,
how best to defend against that, right? So
I mean this is a hard to answer question, but really AI, many are concerned. Many are concerned, and some will say that AI is already here with regard to ransomware. And I'm not talking about delivery techniques and phishing, which AI is there. Obviously, there are no more errors and there's no more language barrier. Obviously, the AI facilitates more groups and more attackers to exploit your environment. But specifically, I'm talking about AI in the landscape of ransomware. To what time will ransomware implement AI and will leverage AI to do a smarter encryption, to do a smarter exfiltration? I think this is the bigger question. Uh, there were cases, I mean, obviously, some would say a real case, others will say it's just a training, but there are a lot of proof of concept, at least, of ransomwares that are dropping AI models directly onto the environment. Some proof of concept was a prompt blocker, I think published by Asset. In other cases, we will demonstrate that, I think, in a week or two. Brad, you'll update when is our demonstration of AI-based ransomware. Um, it's not like you have a wave of ransomwares right now, but very soon there will be, especially when the models will be optimized to smaller size, because right now it requires quite a large size of dropping a model like a Llama or OpenAI-based model into the environment, like gigas of information. But we also saw, again, evasion through VirtualBox with an images of five or 4 gigabytes of information. It's not that it's not feasible. Why would you drop a model? Why would you powerhouse like a ransomware with AI? From different reasons. Because of unpredictability. As soon as you have AI that knows how to evade the existing pattern matching and security controls, which are many times um, have patterns like if you encrypt this file and then you encrypt that folder and you do that within a very short time, then you are ransomware, right? This is how still many of the preventive capabilities for vendors working. Now, obviously that can be bypassed, but imagine you have an AI inside. It's proven. We will show that in a proof of concept. Just pick a different order. Just choose not to do specific folders. This will break all the detection at once. And there will not a single ADR that will detect that. So I do foresee AI being integrated within the ransomware landscapes, both for exfiltration and encryption, very soon within the next 6 month to 12 months time frame. And this is why it's so important to use a different technique of detection, prevention, deception, AI-based, application control-wise. I mean, I'm not only talking about Morphisec, which is a great deception-based prevention solution, but really any different technique than just detecting patterns, right? You can close your environment, you could do zero trust, you can, again, introduce AI inside to have additional things. So, but, obviously the risk definitely exists.
Wow, what a session. Thank you so much, Michael. I mean, this really, truly was a masterclass in anti-ransomware. Um, Thank you for myself and the rest of the attendees today. So the session was recorded if you want to watch it again, or if this is the first time watching it and you're watching the recording. To learn more, please go to morphosec.com. If you want to learn more about events, morphosec.com/events. We do have a monthly demo series, as Michael mentioned. Our next one's coming up on November 6th, 2025. And we will be talking about securing agentic AI in that session. We rotate every month with a new topic, a new area where we focus on, and we show it live. We show it in action, what it's like on the front lines, and how this can help your business be resilient and ultimately stop ransomware now and for good. So for now, thank you, and we'll see you next time.